Oil prices have risen to 11-month highs after OPEC and its allies reached an agreement to keep output steady through March. They made the decision to bolster prices as the return of lockdowns around the world threatens to further reduce demand for crude. Saudi Arabia has agreed to make additional cuts to its production of 1 million barrels per day in February and March. That's the equivalent of about 1% of the world's oil supply. Russia and Kazakhstan will increase their production by a combined 75,000 barrels per day. The deal brings total output cuts by the 24 countries that make up OPEC and its allies to about 8 million in both February and March. Okay, let's get more now with Ellen Wald, who joins us from Jacksonville, Florida. She's the president of the energy consulting firm Transversal Consulting and the author of the book Saudi Inc. Great to have you back on the program, Ellen. Now, many analysts have been surprised by Saudi Arabia's unilateral decision to cut output by another 1 million barrels per day. What do you make of that gesture? Is it simply a goodwill act of faith, or is there something more behind it?
Well, it was certainly presented by the Saudi oil minister first as a big surprise and also a gift to the oil industry from a nation that, as he said, sees itself as the guardian of the oil industry. So he did his very best to portray it as kind of a gift and a surprise gesture of goodwill. But the fact remains is that essentially what happened at this meeting was that Russia, along with Kazakhstan, got their way. They get to increase production basically along the lines of what they would have their share of a 500,000 barrel per day increase, whereas everybody else in OPEC is basically rolling over production, keeping it steady. And Saudi Arabia comes in with this big voluntary cut, which to me really makes it look like Saudi Arabia is resuming its policy of basically playing swing producer for the market, which is something that the Saudis did a lot in the 1980s. Basically, the rest of OPEC could increase or keep production steady, and Saudi Arabia would cut production in order to keep a floor on prices. And the end result for Saudi Arabia was not very good because they weren't very good at keeping prices up, and their own production and revenues fell. So I think that Saudi Arabia is kind of on the precipice here of potentially setting a precedent for this kind of action, which is really fundamentally undermines the entire group and the entire agreement which was made, which was that everybody cuts production together, basically the same amount, other than certain countries that had special dispensations because of war or sanctions. And so while the oil market is really loving this and prices have gone up, it's something that we really need to keep an eye on. Will Saudi Arabia have any clout to force other countries to comply at this point when they've basically said, we'll pick up the slack?
Now, as we've been talking about previously, Russia has really been pushing to ramp up production even during this pandemic. Why would it look to do that when prices have been depressed throughout this crisis?
Well, there are a couple reasons. The first is that Russia is pretty satisfied, at least according to the government, with prices in the $40 range. So that's where they're basing their budget off of. That's what they're happy with. I think they think that if prices get higher, you get more production from elsewhere, and so they're kind of happy with that as this kind of just right price to keep production from climbing in other areas and also keep that they have enough space. But right now, at least their push to increase prices, it makes a lot of sense because for the time being, prices have really been basically divorced from the economic situation. We've got hard lockdowns in Europe, in the UK, in Germany, in several very big states in the United States have these hard lockdowns, and yet oil prices don't seem to respond to that. And so from Russia's perspective, it's really, well, why not take advantage of this and sell more oil? We can put more oil in the market, but prices don't seem to respond to that. They don't seem to go down, so we might as well sell what we can while the prices are up.
Okay, and just very quickly, Ellen, we've just got news from the Energy Information Administration that the US didn't import any Saudi crude last week for the first time in 35 years. It seems to be a significant development. Is this just a one-off because of the pandemic, or is this something else at play here?
Well, I think that it's a very significant move. In addition to not importing any from Saudi Arabia, they also didn't import any from Iraq or other OPEC nations. So it is actually a very significant marker. But what it really is reflects is the fact that Saudi Arabia is not sending a lot of crude to the United States. If Saudi Arabia wanted to flood the United States with crude, it could. In fact, it did that in the summer when there was a flotilla of Saudi oil that headed to the United States. They also own the largest refinery in the United States, and that refinery can be directed to buy Saudi crude if they wanted to. But they don't. They'd much rather send that crude to Asia right now. So what we're really seeing is just a realignment of trade patterns, and the Saudis still have the ability to send it to the U.S. if they want to, but it's more lucrative for them to send it to Asia.
Oh, very fascinating. Ellen Wald, thank you again for that. And look, I'm looking forward to our chats in 2021.